They say God never abandons those who act with a sincere heart, but sometimes life makes you feel otherwise. Some grow up so lost and broken that they learn to see pain as their only companion, to endure mockery, to believe they are a mistake, until one day they get used to walking through life with their gaze fixed on the ground, as if heaven itself had turned its back on them. This story will take you on the journey of a poor, orphaned, and rejected boy who, despite his pain, always chose kindness. Hunger, humiliation, loneliness. Nothing extinguished his inner light. On a quiet path by the river, the boy decides to help a frail old man, unaware that this humble gesture would open a spiritual door that only those with a pure heart can see. What seemed like a simple act of compassion became a divine revelation. God himself appeared in his path to remind him that he was never alone. This story speaks of faith in the midst of poverty, hope in the face of the worst adversity, divine rewards that arrive unannounced, how God reveals himself through those in need, and the power of giving even when you have nothing. Before continuing, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I'd love to read your story and see how far a message travels, so stay until the end, because this story could change the way you see trials, poverty, purpose, and God's presence in your life. His name was Elias. He lived in a shack made of scrap wood and corrugated tin at the edge of a forgotten village, nestled between a winding river and fields that had long forgotten the touch of a plow. The shack, if one could call it that, was more a testament to survival than a home. Its walls let the wind whistle through, carrying the scent of damp earth and the chill of lonely nights. The roof, a patchwork of rusted metal sheets, offered little more than a suggestion of shelter, and when it rained, the drops inside fell with a rhythm that marked the passing of long, sorrowful hours. Elias had been an orphan for as long as he could remember. His parents were just faded whispers, stories told by a few older villagers who recalled a kind couple taken too soon by a sudden fever. He was left in the care of a distant, embittered aunt who saw him as nothing more than another mouth to feed, another burden in a life already filled with scarcity. From a young age, he learned the harsh language of rejection. At the market, other children, dressed in clothes without holes, would point and laugh at his ragged tunic and bare, dirt-caked feet. Their parents would pull them away, as if his poverty were a contagious disease. He learned to make himself small, to become invisible. He would slip through the village like a shadow, his eyes always downcast, his shoulders perpetually hunched, as if carrying a weight far heavier than his own small frame. Hunger was a constant companion, a dull ache in his stomach that he learned to ignore. He would forage for wild berries by the river, or offer to do the meanest chores for a crust of bread or a handful of leftover grains. His aunt often forgot to leave him food, her mind clouded by her own struggles, and Elias would go to his thin straw mat at night, his stomach empty, but his heart strangely resilient. He never cursed his fate. Instead, he would look at the stars through the cracks in the roof and whisper a silent prayer, not for riches or comfort, but for the strength to see another day. One sweltering afternoon, after a long morning of trying to find work and being turned away at every door, Elias was walking back to his shack. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the dust from the path clung to his sweat-soaked skin. He had managed to earn a single slightly stale piece of bread from a baker who had taken pity on him. It wasn't much, but to Elias it was a feast. He clutched it tightly, his stomach growling in anticipation. He planned to save half for the next day, a small assurance against the gnawing uncertainty of his life. As he neared the old wooden bridge that crossed the river, he saw a figure huddled in the shade of a large willow tree. It was an old man, his body frail and bent with age. His clothes were even more tattered than Elias's, and his skin was wrinkled like ancient parchment. The man's white hair was thin, and a long, unkempt beard rested on his chest. He was trembling slightly, despite the heat, and his eyes, when he slowly lifted his head, were filled with a deep, weary sadness that seemed to hold all the sorrows of the world. Elias stopped. A voice in his head, the voice of survival, told him to keep walking. The bread was his. He had earned it. It was the only thing he had. But another voice, a gentler one that came from deep within his soul, urged him to stop. He saw in the old man's eyes a reflection of his own loneliness, his own hunger. He saw a fellow human being in desperate need. Forgetting his own empty stomach, Elias walked over to the man. "Sir," he said softly, his voice barely a whisper, "you look unwell. Are you hungry?" The old man looked up at the boy, his gaze seeming to pierce right through him. He didn't speak, but simply gave a slow, tired nod. Without a second thought, Elias broke his precious piece of bread in half. He held out the larger piece to the stranger. "Here," he said, "please take this. It's not much, but it's all I have." The old man's trembling hand reached out and took the bread. He looked from the bread to the boy's face, and for the first time, a faint light flickered in his weary eyes. He took a small bite, chewing it slowly as if it were the most delicious thing he had ever tasted. Elias sat down beside him, not saying a word, and began to eat his own smaller portion. They sat there in silence, sharing a humble meal under the shade of the willow tree. The world around them, with all its noise and cruelty, seemed to fade away. In that moment, there were only two souls, a boy and an old man, sharing a simple act of kindness. When they had finished, the old man turned to Elias. His voice, when he finally spoke, was not frail or weak, but clear and resonant, filled with an authority that made the air itself seem to hum. "You have a good heart, child," he said. "You, who have nothing, have given everything. Why did you do it?" Elias looked down at his hands, feeling a little shy. "I don't know, sir. You looked hungry, and my mother. Well, the villagers say my mother always told them that kindness is a treasure that costs nothing to give." The old man smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. The lines of weariness seemed to melt away, and his eyes began to shine with an otherworldly light, a light so bright and pure that Elias had to shield his own. The tattered rags the man wore seemed to shimmer and change, transforming into robes of brilliant white that flowed like liquid light. The frail, bent figure straightened, becoming tall and majestic. A warmth, more profound and comforting than the sun, enveloped Elias, chasing away every shadow of fear and loneliness he had ever known. Elias stared, his mouth agape, his heart pounding in his chest. He was not afraid. Instead, he felt a sense of peace he had never experienced before, a feeling of being completely and utterly known, of being home. "Do not be afraid, Elias," the being of light said, his voice now echoing not just in the air, but in the boy's very soul. "Because you shared what little you had, because your heart remained pure in the face of suffering, you have shown that my light has not been extinguished in you." The being reached out and placed a hand on Elias's head. A wave of love and strength coursed through him, healing wounds he didn't even know he had. The constant ache of hunger vanished, replaced by a feeling of profound fulfillment. The weight of humiliation and rejection lifted from his shoulders, and he felt as if he could stand tall for the first time in his life. "I have seen your hidden tears and heard your silent prayers," the divine voice continued. "You believed you were forgotten, that you were walking alone. But I have been with you every step of the way. I was in the baker's pity, in the berries by the river, and in the strength you found to face each new day. I reveal myself not in thunder and lightning, but in the quiet acts of love performed by my children. Today I revealed myself through you, and just as quickly as he had appeared, the light began to soften. The majestic figure slowly faded, leaving behind only the gentle rustle of the willow leaves and the soft gurgle of the river. The old man was gone. Elias was alone again, but he was no longer lonely. He stood up, his body feeling light and his spirit soaring. He looked at his reflection in the river, and the face that stared back was not that of a scared, downtrodden boy, but of a child who knew he was deeply and unconditionally loved. From that day forward, everything changed. Elias returned to the village, but not as a shadow. He walked with his head held high, a gentle smile on his face. The other villagers noticed the change. The fear and shame in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet confidence and a radiant peace. They no longer saw a poor orphan, but a young man with a spirit that shone brighter than any riches. Opportunities began to appear as if from nowhere. The baker offered him a permanent job. A farmer, noticing his diligence, gave him a small plot of land to cultivate. Elias never became wealthy in worldly terms, but he was the richest man in the village. His treasure was not gold or silver, but the unwavering faith in his heart. He shared everything he had, just as he had shared that piece of bread, and he taught everyone he met that God does not live in grand temples, but in the hearts of those who are willing to love, to give, and to see the divine in the face of a stranger. He learned that trials are not a sign of abandonment, but an invitation to draw closer to God, and that true purpose is found not in what we have, but in what we are willing to give. His life became living proof that God will never abandon his children, especially those who, even in their darkest hour, choose to be a light for others. If you enjoyed this beautiful story and reflection, don't forget to share it with anyone you think might find it useful. Like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos and new reflections for your life. See you in the next video. See you soon.